Hello, everyone. I'm Warren Sheridan. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you all so much for having me. And just a little bit about myself. I'm a shared parenting educator at the facility Guardian House, and I'll talk about our organization here a little bit later on in our presentation. And there, I do teach a shared parenting class through a wonderful organization called the Bear County Domestic Relations Office, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on in our session as well. My hope and intention is to hopefully give you all that are on this call here today a little bit of insight as to really helping to navigate the divorce and separation process and some of the ways that children are often kind of put in the middle and hopefully come up with some really good techniques to try to help children through the process of divorce and separation. So once again, thank you all so much for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now, and we're going to start the PowerPoint presentation that I have here. Alrighty, so a little bit about our organization, Guardian House. Really, one of our main goals is to we work to prevent family violence and serve children who are at high risk of child abuse and domestic violence. One of the main things that we do at Guardian House is supervised visitation services. We also do something called monitored exchanges. And we also offer counseling services as well as various educational programs. Like I mentioned, I am the facilitator for the shared parenting program, but we also have a general parenting program as well. And this picture that's on there is actually one of our families that comes to Guardian House for services. They're outside of on our back porch there, and I've been with Guardian House for going on about 5 years at this point, and I've really seen the difference that the organization has made in the lives of so many different children and families. So I'll share a little bit more toward the end of the presentation about what we do, but I just wanted to discuss Guardian House before we get started here on the presentation on children and divorce. So the very first thing I'm going to start off with here is a statistic. It says 50% of all children born to married parents today will experience the divorce of their parent before they're 18 years old. And about almost half of those children will see the breakup of the second marriage. And that's really a significant number. And it's a number that has been pretty much consistent since about the late 1960s in the United States of America. The average age of a child divorce has dropped from 9.5 years to around 6 years of age. Now, there's a couple of reasons why we've seen a drop in that age from 9.5 years to 6 years, and really it's kind of two factors. One of them being that often just marriages kind of aren't working out. People are divorcing earlier than they used to. And then there's also this the other phenomenon that oftentimes people they're having children before they're married, and so they already have some time that they've been with that individual. There's problems that start occurring, and then they've gotten married, and then they try to work out that marriage, and then things don't wind up working out well. So we see those two reasons why we've seen kind of that age drop in terms of children who are divorced, and that's really a significant age. It's 3.5 years in terms of the average age that a child can first experience divorce, and 6 is quite a young age. So really, why is there a need in our community? In the United States alone, in 2020, there were 2,132,853 marriages. But there were also 782,038 divorces in the United States. That's 45 states reporting, including Washington D.C. District, and that's a really, really significant number here in the United States. It's really around like 36% or so, somewhat married people wind up being divorced, or people wind up getting divorced, and that's a very large number. In Texas alone, 46% of divorces involve children, and about 25% of those involve 2 or more children, and 21% involve 1 child. So around 4,100 divorces involve children in Bexar County, and about 2,911. So I'm sorry. There's 4,100 divorces involve children, and a minimum of 2,911 kids involved. And that's a lot of children that are experiencing divorce here in our county. And out of that number, out of that 4,100 divorces, about 1,366 of those divorces are considered high conflict divorces with children. And that's really something that I'm going to focus on are these kind of high conflict divorce situations, and really how they affect our children in some ways that we can help kind of thwart some of that, some of the trauma that children are often faced with when they're going through divorce or separation. It says here in this quote, or this statistic down here, it says over the last 5 years, matrimonial attorneys have seen an increase in domestic violence issues during divorce cases, as well as increase in cases involving restraining orders. So, as I mentioned, there's definitely a high need for this in our community. We often see this happen, and there's a definite need for some education in terms of navigating through some of these high conflict types of scenarios. And what is a high conflict family? What is a high conflict scenario? They are categorized, or some of their attributes that include some of these things that I'm about to go over right now. Well, the first one is a children's opportunity to maintain a relationship with both parents is precluded by the parental behavior. So really, children don't have the opportunity to have to be with both parents because of their parents' behaviors. Often there's all sorts of different reasons as to why they're not able to maintain a relationship with both of their parents. We're going to go over some of those here in some of these other bullet points. But that's really one of the hallmarks of what a high conflict family looks like. Number two, ongoing adult interpersonal behavior exposes children to negative messages and inappropriate role expectations. So, in this particular bullet point, the relationship between the adults really exposes children to all sorts of different types of messages in terms of what's expected of them as children, and also what's expected of them in a family relationship. So, for example, that's like kind of asking your child to choose a side in terms of the after a divorce or separation, or now that you're no longer with your wife anymore, you're expecting your children to take on that your oldest daughter to take on that role of a mother to the children. So those types of things really help to add a lot of high conflict, but also create a lot of stress and anxiety in the life of the child as well. Number three, ongoing interparental verbal and or physical conflict exposes children to potential emotional or physical harm. Now, that is probably one of the most significant hallmarks, because when there is physical and verbal violence that's going on in the family system, it really exposes children to a lot of undue trauma. And that trauma can manifest itself in lots and lots of different ways. And I'll go over some of those when we get to the point on children's development here. But this is definitely one of the biggest hallmarks in terms of family conflict when we are dealing with the divorce or separation. Number four, child physical or sexual abuse and neglect is alleged. That's kind of a no-brainer. Of course, something like child physical or sexual abuse can certainly cause a family to be in high conflict, and a lot of times that's often can be some underlying results and or reasons as toward why divorces or separations can occur. And finally, number five, domestic violence exposes adult victims to potential physical harm. And when we have a household where there is a victim and batterer relationship, it really makes an environment that is just unstable for the child, and really gives that child a lot of undue stress and anxiety. And like I mentioned, it can manifest itself in so many different ways that are that really affect the kids and cause them to start regressing or showing lots of different types of behaviors, especially in the school environment, or even in their social circles, and even at home. So what's happening in the family system? Here in this illustration, this is an actual picture that a child drew in a counseling session when asked how they felt. And here in this graphic, you've got a heart, and it's got mom and dad and a bunch of daggers pointing towards the heart. And it says, "I'm surrounded by hate." And that is a significant thing for a child to state how they feel when it comes down to their relationship with their parents and how they feel in that family system. We as parents, our goal is to hopefully surround our child with love and care and compassion. But this particular child in this situation really feels like they are surrounded by hate to such a point where they feel like daggers are sticking through daggers are going through their hearts from all sides, right? Both from mom and dad, and whatever outside force that is. And really looking at this picture is such a strong metaphor for how a lot of children feel during a divorce or separation, and they feel like they're stuck in the middle, and they feel often that they really do have daggers going through their hearts, that they have to choose, that something's going to literally have to kind of, or figuratively kind of, cut their heart in half, and they have to one part has to go with mom, one part has to go with dad. And that's certainly something that we don't want to have to do with our children. We want to make sure that they feel comfortable enough, loving both parents and not having any type of remorse about loving both parents. They should have the ability to freely love both parents, without having to feel any type of guilt about it, and especially us as parents, not kind of, I guess, kind of blaming the children, or kind of lambasting them for wanting to have some affinity for both of their parents. And here are some increased risk factors that we have when we have children, for things in the family system. Excuse me. Less effective parenting. That often occurs during a divorce or separation, due to lots of different factors. So, often, you as a parent, you're going through, your own trauma. So, you're trying to deal with the divorce, you're trying to navigate your feelings and emotions. And a lot of times parenting can sometimes take a back seat to the things that you have going on. And less effective parenting is definitely a risk factor, because when you even become when you diminish your parenting skills, rather, even in a small capacity, really affects children, in a great way. Another reason why we might see some less effective parenting is that, during divorces or separations, often, the household loses income. So the other parent either has to work or has to work more, and is often just not there, just not available, for the child. So just kind of as by default, you become a less effective parent just because of your circumstances, because you're unable to be there as frequently, as you normally would. Another one is decreased parental involvement, and that's such a huge, huge risk factor, in a family system when you have a decreased parental involvement. Like I mentioned, even when it's small, when a parent isn't involved, it really causes significant, changes and differences, in that child, and I'll touch on a lot of those a bit later. Another one is diminished economic resources. So, like I mentioned, often during divorce or separation, you lose that income. If you're a dual income household, you just lost half of your income. Or if you were a stay-at-home parent and you never had to work before, you now have to try to find a job, or you just lost your only source of income if you were not the primary breadwinner in the home. So having that economic diminished resource not only puts a additional strain on the parent, but also on the child as well, in terms of things that they are capable of doing, or things that they want or need to do. And often children don't kind of understand the money aspect that goes on behind the scene, and how expensive it is to be a parent. They may not understand that, hey, I can't get those Jordans I wanted. You'll have to settle for the Walmart special instead. And that causes them, additional kind of stress and anxiety in their life, in their social circle, especially at certain developmental ages. Finally, negative parental coping as well. Oftentimes, just the way that you as a parent are able to cope with this situation, you going through the divorce, directly affects how your children are going to cope with the situation as well. And so much of what our children do is based off of a concept called modeling, where you are doing something, and your children pretty much, they follow what you do, right? They start modeling exactly what you do. And you see that a lot of times with very young children, right? That you see your daughter in dress up, wearing your high heels and your jewelry and your makeup, right? Because they want to be like mom. That's exactly what they're doing. Or you see a little boy, outside, trying to kind of cut the yard, or doing whatever kind of gender role that they see that other parent doing. And they model things as basic as that, just those kind of regular gender roles that we see a parent doing, but they can also model some of these negative coping skills that we are exhibiting, right? So if we are not handling the divorce or separation in a positive way, if we're overly depressed, or we've just kind of become kind of neglectful towards our duties, sometimes our children might model that same type of behavior. On the opposite end of the coin, some children, because their parents aren't coping well, they feel like they have to take care of their parent, or they feel like they have to do additional duties, right? Like I mentioned, that kind of older sibling taking the role of that parent. Another one is increased instability in residents, school, and care providers. So this is a very big risk factor as well, because children really crave stability. They absolutely do, and I think more than anything, this pandemic has kind of taught us that. So very all kids, well, most kids, I think, will say, "I hate school. I don't want to go to school." But during the pandemic, as soon as they were kind of okay, maybe those kids for about a month or two not being in school, but right afterwards, they had a longing to go back to school, because they really do crave stability, and they crave that structure. And when children don't have that, it really causes them a lot of issues, and a lot of struggles. And many of you parents, having to work with your children from home, and making sure their educational needs are met, can definitely have experienced that firsthand. So when children are in an unstable relation, or excuse me, in an unstable situation, that means moving schools if you're in a divorce or separation, moving residences, right, not being around their friends or their neighbors, not being with the same care provider. Right? Some people move out of state or move out of the city after divorce or separation. And that increased instability for the child really causes a lot of life stressors for them, and manifests itself in lots and lots of different ways. Another one is subsequent parental relationships, marriages, and divorces. So, just your relationships as a parent, being very cognizant of those types of things, and how it affects the child, especially after the divorce. Just the divorce itself has caused some stressors to the child, but also potentially getting back into a relationship with somebody else, or your dating life, that can also cause some additional stress for the child, especially if they're not ready for that type of thing. As a lot of times, children might see somebody moving in, or moving into your life if you start dating relatively quickly after divorce or separation, as trying to take the place of that person, that child's other parent. Another one is a degree of hostility during the divorce process. And this really deals with, how well or not well you're able to handle the divorce, and kind of how bad the divorce was. And it sounds kind of silly, because I think all divorces are bad, but a lot of them are more hostile than others. Some divorces kind of go off very well. A lot of parents agree. They can come to an agreement. They know that the relationship, was kind of heading south for a long time. This is, in everybody's best interest to do this. And hey, that's great. You have a really amicable divorce, and you're able to do what's necessary. But for the most part, and a lot of times, divorces aren't that easy. They're very difficult. There's a lot of hostility, and there's a lot of fighting. There's a lot of bickering, and the children are often put in the middle of those situations. So when children are privy to those hostile situations, it really increases their inability to cope with what's going on in the divorce process, as well as their ability to really just function in their daily lives, and really affects lots of different aspects of their life. And like I mentioned, I'll touch on those here in a little bit. And it says, when parents separate, the greatest predictor of a child's well-being is the level of conflict between parents. And that's absolutely true. Like I just mentioned, sometimes, when there is just great conflict, that affects the child's well-being in such a significant way. And, if it's a more amicable divorce, very little has changed for the child. The kid's a little bit more well adjusted to the process of the divorce, when things are going a little bit more amicably. And what's the price of parental conflict? we see lots of different manifestations when there is a parental conflict in the home, and and our children really manifest these things in lots of different ways. One of them being delinquency, right? Your kids are out late, they're sneaking out of the house, they're misbehaving in school, they're doing graffiti, they're just doing all kinds of things, they're stealing, just delinquent behaviors, and sometimes children manifest that their feelings and delinquent behaviors for a variety of reasons. Number one, they some certain ages of children just don't know how to cope, and it just manifests themselves as them kind of acting out. And a lot of times, children start acting out because they kind of want attention. Like the attention's not on them. You as a parent are dealing with your own issues with that other going dealing with a divorce. You're trying to cope yourself, and you might not have as much time for the child. So often, the child will engage in some delinquent behaviors as a way of trying to get some more attention on them, right? So even if it's bad attention, that it's still attention nonetheless, and the child winds up getting in some delinquent behaviors. Another one is violent behaviors. And like I mentioned earlier, children very much so model a lot of what we see and do. So if in your relationship with the other parent there was domestic violence or family violence going on, and your children saw that, um, a lot of times they themselves become violent and start exhibiting violent behaviors toward either their peers or their siblings, or maybe sometimes even you as the parent, right? They start exhibiting those types of behaviors. Another one is increased anger and reduced ability to control it. So, especially children that are in kind of the tween and teen groups, we really see children. They have a lot going on with them biologically, and just kind of naturally. It's like their emotions are like a light switch, right? They can be happy one minute, very angry and upset the next, and a divorce or separation really exacerbates those emotions that the child has, and their anger just increases, right? And children are often mad about lots of things. They're mad that they don't have both parents anymore. They're mad that they might have to move away and go to a different school. They're mad that they have to move out of their home, right? That they have to be shuffled back and forth from parent to parent. And really, children as a whole, they lack an ability just overall, just naturally, to reduce their anger, right? Children don't have a good constructive way of dealing with anger a lot of times unless it's learned. And their anger can be manifest in lots of these other things too, right? They can, out of their anger, they start engaging in delinquent activities, or they become violent, or so yes, really having that increased anger and an inability to control it is really one of the big parts that can, or I guess precursors rather, that kind of force children's behaviors to start changing in this process. Another one is depression, and just children becoming depressed is often very common. And signs of depression include your children maybe not wanting to eat, right? So decreased appetite, things like sleeping a lot, something called anhedonia, which is an inability to take pleasure in things that they normally like doing. So, for example, let's say your son likes to go play basketball, and you take him to go play basketball, and you're just kind of moping around the court, not really enjoying it. Or you buy your daughter her favorite video game, and she doesn't even play it, right? She just keeps it in the package. That's a sign of depression, right? And really, just being educated and knowing what true depression looks like is really one of the first steps in helping your children to get help. And if that depression is incredibly severe, we recommend sometimes counseling or therapy for the child to really help with that depression, because that depression, when started at an early age, can continue to kind of evolve oftentimes throughout the lifetime. And oftentimes depressed children become depressed adults if there's not a break in that depression. So that's incredibly important to keep in mind. Another one is isolation and grief. We'll often see children just isolating themselves socially from their friends, and sometimes even from family, right? Come down for dinner, go eat in my room. You see kids often doing those types of things where they isolate themselves. They feel like they want to be alone, just with themselves and their own thoughts. And that's often very common for children that going through divorce or separation process, or just out and out grief, just children kind of crying and just being just very very emotional about their parents breaking up. And that grief can last for long periods of time. So let's say it could be a year or two after your divorce, and you're finally going on a date. You're going on a date, and then your kid starts crying because you're going out on a date. That grief often sticks with the child because they're they don't fully have the tools to equip them, or they did not fully have the tools to equip them to help them get over that divorce or separation. Another one is substance use or abuse. Children start um, experimenting with drugs or alcohol as a way to try to make themselves feel better and or to numb the pain. So that's often a very big thing that we see for children in divorce or separations because they don't have any other ways of coping. Other ones are physical symptoms, right? These are called psychosomatic symptoms where you feel this depression, you want to be isolated, and you really just kind of start feeling body pains, right? Just in your body because you're going through so much psychological stress or trauma, and children do that as well as adults. Adults feel psychosomatic pains as well, but literally children feel kind of these physical symptoms that really inhibits them from their growth and development. And there's actually very interesting research study that shows that children who've been exposed to trauma, it can literally physically stunt their growth and development. It can cause a child to not grow as much as like 3 or 4 inches if they were going to grow anymore at their time. So really significant seeing that these physical symptoms can really manifest themselves in such a way that it stunts the actual physical development of the child. There's also behaviors that might mimic ADHD, right? And these types of behaviors are things like your child just kind of being inattentive, maybe. And some people are like, oh, well, they're not. And the teacher says, hey, the kid's not paying attention in school. I think that maybe we should do some testing. But a lot of times it's not full ADHD. It's your child just kind of being somewhere else, just in their mind, because they're having to deal with this divorce or separation. It's just them not being focused, them not being able to really put all of their mental energy at the task that's at hand. And so it seems like it's maybe ADHD where there's a lot of inattentiveness, but it might not be. And then also we might see some hyperactivity as well, and that might manifest itself as delinquency or violent behaviors as well. And that might also look like a symptom of ADHD, but not necessarily, right? That could be a manifestation of the emotional trauma that the children are going through with the divorce or separation. Another one is having low self-esteem, and children just feeling, not having any self-worth, right? Not feeling confident about themselves, right? Then you'll hear children say things like, I'm stupid, or I'm ugly, or I can't do this, or I'm going to fail, or I can't do that in life. And, we see children doing that when they kind of get to that point, and often having that low self-esteem, or seeing your children vocalize that low self-esteem is often kind of a precursor to some symptoms of depression. Another one is impaired relationships with peers and adults, and just let's say you and your kids had a wonderful relationship for the divorce, but now everything has started kind of going downhill, and often those relationships start suffering because of it. Children might feel as though you as a parent are to blame for not having that person's dad or mom around anymore after that divorce or separation. So it causes a rift in that relationship. Another one is impaired cognition, and like I mentioned earlier, just sometimes these types of traumas can really just impair the way that the child is able to think and process information, right? The severe trauma, and like if that can stunt your physical growth, having severe trauma like that, certainly it can impair your ability to think clearly and to make good positive decisions. So this kind of loops me back around to what I talked about in the very beginning. So this impaired cognition sometimes just from that trauma alone can cause some of that violent behavior, can cause that delinquency, can cause them to want to start experimenting with drugs and alcohol or things of that nature, right? So a lot of these things are very much so cyclical, and they kind of build on top of one another, and they just kind of come together and really just create just a really hard time for the children, and it helps just increase that stress and anxiety that child has, and cause them to really not adjust well to that divorce or separation. Um, the next thing that we're going to talk about are developmental stages in divorce and how well these three distinct groups, or how these three distinct groups, number one, develop, and then number two, how it affects them in a divorce or separation, and some of the things that we need to be cognizant of as we as we're dealing with children at these certain types of groups. So really, the developmental stage of the child will greatly affect how the child understands and responds to the divorce, and it may need to be revisited the divorce as the through the as you go through your divorce process and as they reach a new level of development. So how you explain something or how you treat a toddler or a preschooler is going to be very very different than the way that you're going to treat an elementary age child or especially a teen or a preteen. So we'll walk through some of these three developmental stages on these next couple slides, and we'll talk about what those stages look like and how those stages, what's going on in those stages, directly affect how that child is feeling during a divorce or separation. The very first one is toddler and preschool age children. So in this developmental stage, children are meeting these things called developmental milestones, right? Those are those things like taking their first steps and smiling and waving goodbye. Maybe kind of identifying just kind of words, knowing their shapes, colors, things of that nature. During about the second year, so toddlers are moving around more, they're more aware of themselves and their surroundings, right? So children can start getting around, they can move to where they want to move to, right? They can walk around, they can go wherever they want to go without restriction. That's an important part. I'll touch back on that when we talk about the possible impact of the divorce. Children at this age also require consistency and routine and are comforted by familiarity. Very, 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 very important aspect in this stage of development. During this stage, toddlers will show greater independence. They begin to show defiant behavior. They recognize themselves in pictures or a mirror, and they imitate the behavior of others, especially adults and other children. And then finally, toddlers also should be able to recognize the names of familiar people and objects. They form simple phrases and sentences, and they follow simple instructions and directions. So, how do these developmental stages? How do they play into the impact that divorce has on them? The very first one is young children may show defiant behavior as a way of coping with the absence of the other parent. So, like I mentioned, in this stage, one of the most important things is their ability to recognize others and become familiar with others, right? So, a toddler very much so knows when another parent is absent. And that toddler, especially, they don't have a lot, they don't, their verbal skills aren't well developed. So they can't say, hey, I'm feeling really upset that daddy's not here. If they're not going to say that. So, your 3-year-old's throw themselves on the floor and have a tantrum when it's time for them to leave from maybe being exchanged from their dad that day. Right. So you see those types of behaviors, right? Where you might see children start manifesting these types of behaviors in school. And it could be something small that triggers them, right? And us as if there's any educators that are on the line, you're being very cognizant of our types of words and things that we say. So like, oh, like draw your family. That might seem like a very uh, harmless exercise to do, but for a child that's going through a divorce or separation, it's something that can definitely trigger the child and can really kind of turn their mood sour that entire day. Another one is toddlers may mirror the behaviors of adults around them. So, like that slide mentioned, right? Depending on how volatile that divorce or separation was, uh, really determines how well the child is able to cope and handle that divorce or separation. And if there was domestic violence in the home, or if there was excessive yelling or screaming or something like that in the home, often children will mirror that behavior, right? So you're wondering why your toddler is going around hitting people at daycare or they're yelling at you or other people. Well, a lot of times they modeled that behavior, right? Because that's what they were seeing during that divorce or separation process. And like I mentioned, those children are mobile, right? They're able to walk around. So, if they hear you guys, if they would hear you all arguing, in the living room, the kid's in his bedroom, and he walks over and sees the arguments or he sees potentially the domestic violence happening, the child is at first hand witnessing those types of and they start mirroring those behaviors because like I mentioned a big part of that is their ability to start kind of learning and also following simple instructions and following what the other parent is doing as well. Children of this age often tend to take sides, and I'm doing finger quotes, and it says take sides here in quotes as well, of whatever parent they're with currently. And as parents, we need to know that really a toddler or preschool age child cannot take sides. They really do not have the ability to take sides in a divorce or separation. And honestly, it might seem like whoever they were with last, that's the side in quotes that they're taking, but they really aren't. They don't have that, they really don't have the cognitive ability or mental fortitude to take us the side of any parent. They're going to pretty much play nice with whatever parent they're with or whatever person that they are with. So yeah, let's say you're exchanging the child after your separation, and mom just took them to Six Flags, and the kid doesn't want to leave, and it's time for them to go back with dad, and now the kid's screaming and yelling, saying, "I want to stay with mom! I want to stay with mom!" Well, yeah, the kid wants to stay with mom because they think they're gonna continuously going to Six Flags. They had a great day with mom, right? So it's important for us as parents to really not take those types of things to heart, and know that really the child's not taking sides, right? And the kid might say something like, "I hate you. I don't want to go with you." No, it's not the kid actually saying that, right? That's just the way that the kid, with their limited vocabulary, is able to verbalize kind of that, hey, I don't want to, I don't want to leave for mom's. I was having a good time over there. Also, at this age, children sometimes self-blame for the divorce and exhibit regressive behaviors in terms of development. So, especially kind of older toddlers or preschool age children, like those 4-year-olds, they'll say, "Oh, it's all my fault because I was bad in school, and mom and dad started, y'all were arguing because I was bad in school." And it's like, well, no, we weren't arguing because you were bad in school. We were, we were already not in a good place, and the child just being bad in school has kind of exacerbated that situation. So children sometimes hear those types of things, or they hear you arguing about the child, right? You like, where are the kids going to go, and they feel like it's their fault, because oftentimes children are a big topic of what's going to happen during a divorce or separation. And children start internalizing that, and they say, "Oh, it's my fault that it's happening because they keep saying my name or they keep talking about me, so it's my fault." Children might also start regressing. So your once potty trained child is no longer potty trained. They start soiling themselves in public or at school, or they're not, or they start exhibiting bedwetting behaviors. Some children, they start regressing in terms of their words, like they're not saying complete sentences. So instead of "Can I have some pizza, please?" They'd be like, "Me want pizza." They'll start kind of regressing in terms of their verbal skills and their verbal skills and abilities, because they're just dealing with this kind of latent trauma that's lying underneath the surface. So how can we help toddlers and preschoolers adjust? If possible, work together to develop normal, predictable routines. If you can drop the kid off to daycare together, that's a really great way of doing that. Maybe very difficult in the early stages of the divorce or separation, but really helping to kind of keep the routine as consistent as possible is a great way of helping toddlers to adjust. Also, spending quality time with the child and offer that extra attention. And ask trusted friends and relatives to do the same, right? So they might be missing that other parent on a 24/7 basis, but having somebody else there that's going to show them love and care and compassion is a really great way of bolstering that support for the child. Also, discussing your child's feelings if they're old enough to talk, right? Just asking, like, "Hey, how are you feeling today?" "Oh, I'm mad." "Why are you mad?" "Oh, because I didn't get to see dad today." So it could be something as kind of basic as that, but really understanding and just asking for your child's feelings, because they have them, and they will vocalize them. And also doing things like reading books together, and like, once again, assuring them that they are not responsible for the the next age group is elementary school age children. At this age, these are like children like 5 to about like 11 or so years old. Children from pretty much like kindergarten to fifth grade or sixth grade, depending on what you consider elementary school. But at this stage, children start developing empathy, which is really feeling feelings. And then a lot of times they start modeling the same sex parent, right? So they start kind of doing the same types of things that, if you're a man, you start doing what your dad's doing. If you're a woman, you start doing what your mom's doing. A lot of times you start modeling what you're doing kind of more and more. You also start developing a self-concept, right? So determining who you are as a person, right? Having some individuality, and also self-worth and competency, right? So realizing whether you're good at things or not good at things, and also having that self-worth, right? Knowing that you're important to the people in your life. And the impact that these particular stages of development have are that there's an awareness of parental distress, and they may attempt to take care of the parent, right? So children, they have all this empathy, they're feeling feelings. So you as a parent, you could be sitting there crying, and you're just overly upset. You're just tucked away in your bed because you feel so depressed. The child might feel a need to want to take care of you as a parent. Another one is alliance with the parent, and seem as a victim. So at this stage, yes, some children might start kind of taking sides depending on what they're being told. So if they're hearing negative things about the other parent, it's like, hey, I'm going to side with dad because dad's saying all these bad things about mom, and that's just all that they have to go off of. So you can't fully blame the child. They're not fully taking sides fairly. They're only taking sides because of what's being told to them. There's also a lack model of the same-sex parent. So, like I mentioned, a big part of the developmental stage is modeling that same-sex parent. And when the child doesn't have that same-sex parent around anymore, it can definitely cause a lot of issues for the child. Also, the parent may view the child as a reminder of the spouse or a failed marriage. So, especially in the early parts of that divorce or separation, having that child around for some parents can serve as a reminder, and in some forms or fashion that the parent may inadvertently, or sometimes advertently, kind of start mistreating the child because they remind them of that parent, or it reminds them of that failed marriage. Another developmental stage in this for elementary school age children is that they tackle new tasks. Parental encouragement is very critical, and then schoolwork becomes more complex and demanding. So, what's the impact on children for these two developmental stages? The parent doesn't encourage the efforts, or they hinder that sense of initiative. And when they don't have that parental encouragement, if you're overly occupied dealing with a divorce or separation, or if they don't have the encouragement from both parents, it can cause the child to feel like the work that they're doing isn't important, right? Or that the things that they are doing isn't of significance. The child may focus the energy on their family problems, right? That could cause deficiencies in their schoolwork, right? So they might feel like they need to be the problem solver, right? They need to fix the family situation, but that's not their job, and it can certainly start making their schoolwork suffer. Physical symptoms, right? Like I mentioned, children have those psychosomatic symptoms, right? They have upset stomachs, or they might feel nauseous, right? Or they might have headaches, right? So then that leads to absences, and then their schoolwork starts to their quality of schoolwork starts diminishing. And also moving between households and having levels of cooperation between parents. So the stress of kind of being shuffled back and forth from home to home and not having that consistency really makes it difficult for children, right? So say you're at dad's over the weekend, you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot my homework over at mom's, and then dad's not going to go back to get it. That's causing that children's stress and anxiety, especially because school is an important facet, an important aspect of children at that stage. Another one is, especially for older children that are in elementary school, the importance of friends and BFFs, and having strong attachment to specific children, and having sibling relationships, right? They provide the child with a sense of closeness and security. And in a divorce or separation, these two developmental hallmarks, having you have a loss of contact with special friends, or a sense of loss or loneliness just overall. Let's say the child had to move away from their school or from their neighborhood because of the divorce. They've now lost their best friend, and they don't know how to handle that situation. So now they've become very, very withdrawn, or they're not willing to make new friends in their new neighborhood or their school because they feel like they're going to get snatched away from those people that are important in their lives. Also, sibling alliances. So there are times when siblings take certain alliances with certain parents, and let's say sibling number one took mom's side, sibling number two took dad's side, and now they're arguing about which parent was right, or which parent was the fault for the divorce, or who's the worst parent. And now there's a rift between the siblings. And really, the sibling connection is the most significant connection that your child will have. Because even as a parent, once you're dead and gone, most of the time their siblings are still going to be there. And that's that bond that they have to you and that other parent, right? So even when you're not here as a parent anymore. So it's so important to really foster that strong sibling bond. So helping elementary school age children adjust, we want to view students as an individual with unique strengths and weaknesses, and encourage them and affirm them based on their strengths. So really, just giving them that validation, saying, hey, that's a great art project, or you're so good in math, or you did a fantastic job at your social studies, or you're really good at doing your chores, whatever. You really want to ensure that that the child is being validated for their strengths, because at this point in their life they might feel like they're not doing anything well, that nothing they're doing well, that they are not doing anything well just because their parents are in a divorce or separation. You also want to provide the child with a set school schedule or calendar so that they can visualize the schedule. And we want to reinsure consistency and continue that the school may not be and continues in the school things that may not also be happening in the home, especially for educators. It's very important to keep that consistency and throughout the process in the classroom, because a lot of times there is not consistency at home. Also recognizing that some major transitions and changes are happening in the student's life, and a little extra compassion can go a long way, right? So really just being extra compassionate to to children of this age, especially if since you know that there's a divorce or separation going on, and that there's a major transition, just being a little extra compassionate and helping. That can really help an elementary school age child to adjust more better to the situation. You want to create stable and predictable environments, like I mentioned. Advise for this is more for educators, really. Advise parents to notify the school of significant changes in the child's life. You want to watch for signs of compromising of the child's safety as well. Take some time to actively listen to the child. Really just listening, not hearing, right? And there's a big difference between those two, right? Then also, if the child has a meaningful relationship with one parent, recognize that school personnel often can serve as a substitute role model for children as well, and kind of taking that role of maybe that parent that's not there anymore. Another one is with preteens, right? So in this developmental stage, children often feel overwhelmed and disorganized as school begins, and they're involved in more abstract thinking and increased responsibility. So because of this, there's often the impact of divorce separation is that there's anxiety over the separation, and increases the child's disorganization. They're very distracted, and a lot of times they forget books at home or assignments, and they just become overly disorganized. And the child starts feeling bad because, once again, school is really the most important part of a preteen's life, right? That's where they go for recreation, for socialization. So it's an incredibly important part. So there's deficiencies in their educational environment. They feel like they're not doing well there. They start internalizing that and feeling themselves that they're not good, or they're not good people, or they're not a good person. Also, during preteens, it's a hormonal roller coaster, right? There's all sorts of things going on in the bodies of a preteen, and because there's just such an emotional roller coaster, imagine piling on a divorce or separation to that, right? So really, feelings about family may change dramatically from one day to the next, right? They could be like, "I hate you, mom," and the next day it's like, "Oh, you're the best mom of all time." So kids are definitely going through just a slew of emotions because of what's going on with them biologically, because of those hormonal changes. How can we help preteens to adjust to a divorce or separation? We really need to understand the importance for that child to have a sense of belonging and feel the same as others in their group, right? So giving that child the ability to socialize, giving them that ability really just to feel regular, right? And also some normalizing divorce, right? I gave those numbers earlier, right? That it was 39% or so, some odd marriages end in divorce, and 1 in 3 children live without both parents in the household. So normalizing, hey, like, I know that you're going through divorce, your parents are going through divorce, but a lot of people do, and there's lots of other children here that that are going through that, right? That this is something that's it may not be pleasurable, but it's something that's common. And, you can get through this as well as other children before you've gone through it as well. Really keeping on top of the child's academic program and process, that's so important, because school is like I mentioned, it's such an important facet in the child's life. So if the child feels like they're doing well in school, oftentimes the child feels like they're doing well just overall as as a person, right? As a child, as a sibling. And also making time to focus on the child, because as children start entering that preteen age, especially when they become teenagers, they become very egocentric, meaning they just focus on themselves, right? They only they are the sun, and the whole entire universe revolves around them, right? So you really want to start making that effort to focus on the child, and ensuring that the child feels important um, in their life despite what's going on with the divorce or separation. And lastly, we've got the fun group. We've got teenagers, right? In the teenage developmental stage, there's a crave for individualization, right? A lot of times, teenagers they want to separate from their family. They start feeling more independence, and they have this ability to want to explore and accept themselves. There's also a very big need for acceptance in things like peer groups, right? They want to be accepted amongst their friends and especially when they find a peer group where they're amongst like peers, right, where people are just like them. Teens often have abstract reasoning and questioning. They question everything, right? Any with parents of teens will know that teens will say why in a heartbeat, right? And it's because they start questioning what's going on in the world around them, right? They're not just going to take it as the gospel truth for what you're saying. They want a justification for their actions, right? They start questioning their beliefs, like why they believe these things. Is this something that I want to believe in, right? And this is kind of the precursor for what we start doing in early adulthood, right? As adults in our late teens and early 20s, right? We start kind of questioning our beliefs and becoming our own person. So how do these developmental stages impact the teenager? Well, a loss of a parent and intact family may pull the teenager back into the family, right? Because often we want to hold on tight to what we have as parents, and after a divorce or separation, and we just want to kind of keep our kids close by to us. But for teenagers, this is the stage where they don't want that. They want to be by themselves. So they feel a lot of times that they've lost their independence. That causes them a lot of stressors in their lives. Less money, fewer activities. They feel different from their other peers. So, like I mentioned, there's a need for acceptance. So, if you're from a dual income household and now you don't have that dual income household anymore, well, now your teenager may not be able to do the same activities that they could used to do because you just can't afford it anymore. Or you promised them a car for their 16th birthday, but now that can't be afforded. And a lot of times teenagers don't fully understand that aspect. They don't really understand money and the value of a dollar as well as we do as adults. So that it gives them a lot of stress and anxiety. And like I mentioned, teenagers are very, very egocentric. So they're like, oh, it's awful that I can't get a car. It's awful that I can't go with my friends to wherever, just because we can't afford it. And it's like, well, no, like, we've got to pay for bills. There's more important things. So children often feel like they're maybe being neglected if they don't have the opportunity to engage in the things with their peers, and then fear that they're going to be rejected if they are not able to engage in those same activities that their peers are engaging in. And also questions the parents about their relationship, right? So there goes that part that I mentioned about that abstract reasoning and questioning, right? So children will start asking me, well, why did you and mom and dad break up, or what's going on with are you and dad's gonna get you? Are you gonna get back with dad at some point? Why don't y'all just try to work things out? Like I heard mom say that she loves you. Why don't you do that? So they kind of start questioning you on why y'all broke up, or why aren't getting back together. So be prepared for those types of things and really have those types of answers prepared. And those could be very tough questions to answer, especially in the beginning of a divorce or separation. But be prepared for them because teenagers are often likely to ask that question. How can we help teens adjust? Really, the manner of communication for our with our teens is so important. At this age, they understand everything that you're saying, despite what they might make us feel like sometimes. They do understand everything that we're saying. Like I mentioned, children often feel like they are the center of the universe. The world revolves around them. So they use a lot of things called I statements, right? Like, oh, I did this wrong. Oh, it's my fault why I did this. I can't believe this is happening to me. Why can't I go to the mall with my friends? Why can't I get a car? So, we really want to try to help our children to kind of change those I statements around so it avoids that kind of self blaming, right? It removes the blame off of them and let them know that, hey, like it's not your fault. No, it's nothing that you did. No, you can't not. You're not getting a car because of anything that you did, right? Like, no, it's not that. We just can't afford it anymore, right? We don't have two incomes anymore, right? So really, just kind of explaining those things to the teenager in very very basic terms. Also, another good thing is helping that teen to explore and make decisions about his or her future. When teens are faced with a divorce or separation, they often feel like it's kind of the end of the world, right? The world's turned upside down, and for some teens, it feels like just kind of life has stopped, and there's never going to be anything else after it. The tunnel is closed. They're just in the darkness. But really helping that teen to make decisions about the next step in their lives helps them to move on, right? It shows them that yeah, there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and that you that us going through a divorce is just a period in your life, but you have a whole life ahead of you. You have that ability to go forth and do whatever you want to do. So really helping them to make plans about their future, what they want to do, if they're going to go to school or go to the military or have a career or whatever it is that they want to do, helps them to not only kind of get them out of that darkness that they often feel like they are in, but it also gives them a positive distraction so that they don't feel as though they're always just kind of dwelling and stuck in the relationship or the failed relationship in your divorce or separation, right? So, your kids filling out a bunch of college applications and they're doing, interviews for school or whatever. Hey, that's a wonderful distraction, right? And it's setting up a wonderful pathway for them to continue to follow as they go on throughout their lives. Sensitivity to family diversity. You've got two households. We want to be very sensitive a lot of times, and this is really for the educators that might be on this call. But how does this impact the child? So it's like, hey, we're going to make ornament for your home, and the child only makes one ornament, for example. Well, no, like they live in, it's cognizant that children might live in two households, right? Give them that option to do those types of things, right? To fulfill both requirements for both homes, right? Make two gifts for their parents, right? So understand that there's a change in households and things of that nature, and you as parents as well, right? Your child's going shopping for gifts. Allow that child to shop for that other parent as well. Also, things like parent orientation nights, offer multiple orientations on separate days and nights. That's so important, right? So that both parents can engage, because some parents, they just, after a divorce separation, they just cannot be in the same room together. And so really offering both nights so that the parent is engaged in the child's education and the goings on in the child's life is so important, and really helps that child to feel supported by both parents. Also, offering separate parent-teacher conferences for the same exact reason, so that that parent can be involved in that child's education process. Also, note home phone calls to custodial and non-custodial parents. Really, just keeping both parents involved and engaged in terms of what's going on in the child's life, so that there's more support for the child by both parents. That one parent's not just simply left in the dark every single time. A couple of resources, to help through the divorce or separation process. I talk about stages of child development, but as a parent, it's important to know these stages of child development so that you can know what is expected of your child and what to expect at a certain age. And it always says parents don't come with a handbook, but you can certainly go buy one, though, right? Or you can Google, stages of child development and learn more about what's expected of a child at a certain age. And there really are guides out there that talk about, if you put stages of child development and divorce, you can find resources out there on the internet. Also, co-parenting, right? Finding a co-parenting counselor or co-parenting programs to teach you how to co-parent effectively. Building new family rituals and traditions. That's helpful in keeping that culture alive for the child, but also giving them that ability to create new things, right? And not kind of thinking about, oh, it was like this when mom and dad were together. Now it's nice to create some new traditions, and also coming up with effective ways of handling holidays. So here are some services that Guardian House offers. Like I mentioned, we really do try to help families engage and be together the best way possible. The particular class that I teach for the Domestic Relations Office, it's a program that helps families where visitation has not occurred. One parent is preventing the child from seeing the other parent. And I teach the shared parenting class for that. It's not open to the public, but we're trying to get classes like that. But there are some other excellent resources as well. And if you ever need any other resources, please reach out to Guardian House. That's our contact information that's there. And we offer all of this and more. And if we don't offer service, we'll be happy to find a reference and a service for you. So thank you all so much. I appreciate your time.